Jen and Ben, the investigation into this home continues tonight. Investigators digging through the rubble to try to find the cause of the fire and any clues into how a New Haven hero could have ended up dead.
Today we lost one of our own, Ricardo Torres, who was doing the job that he always dreamed of doing.
Second-year firefighter Ricardo Torres Jr. and his fellow brothers at the New Haven Fire Department responded to flames at a Valley Street home just before 1 a.m. Wednesday morning. The smoke billowing from the two-family house filling the neighborhood.
The smell of like something burning, was overwhelming my house.
Companies arrived within minutes to find the home fully engulfed with two residents trapped inside.
Engine 9 to New Haven. We got one person trapped in the window on the Delta side.
Chief, I'm getting secondary reports that there's an individual stuck in the house, first floor, rear.
Crews worked to pull the 84-year-old homeowner from the first floor and a male tenant from the second. Both were treated for non-life-threatening injuries.
Not too long after, a mayday was transmitted, which is a signal for a firefighter in distress.
That firefighter was the 30-year-old Torres, who had become disoriented.
It's hard to explain. Turn the lights out, close your eyes. That's what it's like. You're finding your way through. Easy to get disoriented.
Torres was found unconscious next to Lieutenant Samad Rankins. Their air supply tanks empty. The two were extracted and rushed to Bridgeport Hospital.
Firefighter Torres succumbed to his injuries. Lieutenant Rankins is in critical condition at the burn unit in Bridgeport.
Two other firefighters were injured, including one who sustained burns when trying to administer CPR to one of his unconscious brothers. Connecticut State Police Fire, Explosion, and Investigation Unit is inspecting the cause.
New Haven Fire Department, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
Torres leaves behind a wife and a 3-year-old child. The two were expecting another child as well. Everybody in this neighborhood, this city, and the state calling Torres and all of those who responded to this home heroes. And for that, we all thank you. In New Haven, Dave Puglisi, Fox 61 News.